People on the
We need
massive
to
Navy
move
ship
now,
had seen
sir.
countless dignitaries,
situation
heroes,
is critical
and
and time
decorated
is against
officers
us.
pass through its steel decks, but none of them had ever seen anything like this. A single dad in worn-out boots, holding his little daughter's hand, stood quietly near the railing, waiting for permission to step aboard. A young Navy SEAL, full of pride and loud confidence, smirked and asked him, "Hey man, what's your rank?" The single dad just smiled softly, brushing a leaf out of his daughter's hair. "No rank. I'm just visiting." The SEAL chuckled loudly until an officer sprinted across the deck, saw the man's face, and froze. Within seconds, alarms didn't ring, but hearts did. Commanders whispered. Sailors straightened. And every admiral on the ship stepped onto the deck, lined up, and saluted him first. The young SEAL's jaw dropped. And the single dad whispered to his daughter, "I told you, sweetheart. We don't show people who we are. We just live it." What nobody knew was that the man they treated like a nobody once saved the entire fleet. And he'd sworn never to speak of it again. Ethan Cole had lived quietly for 11 years in a remote fishing town on the coast. Every morning, he packed little lunch notes for his daughter, Emily, tiny hearts, silly jokes, and reminders that she was loved. He woke her gently, braided her hair, and walked her to the school bus. To everyone around, Ethan was just a normal single dad trying to rebuild a life after losing his wife, Claire, to a sudden illness. No one knew that before all this, he had lived a life of shadows, storms, and missions no one spoke about. No one knew he used to be the kind of man who jumped from helicopters into black water with no moon to guide him. No one knew he had once been called the Ghost of the Pacific. And that was exactly how Ethan wanted it. Emily was his world now, the only thing that mattered. He had hung up his uniform, his medals, and his ghosts the moment he became a father. He wanted peace, silence, and a life where the loudest sound was his daughter's laugh. One day, Emily came home holding a bright blue flyer. "Daddy," she said excitedly. "Our class is going on a field trip to the Navy shipyard. Some parents can come too. Will you come with me? Please?" Ethan froze. The Navy shipyard. The place he had walked away from. The place that held memories he never wanted Emily to see. But her eyes were shining. She was bouncing on her toes. And Ethan Cole could never say no to her. "Of course," he said softly, kissing her forehead. "I'll come." The morning of the trip arrived with the smell of ocean salt and distant foghorns. Parents gathered, excited, snapping photos. Kids buzzed around with field trip badges and backpacks. Emily clung to Ethan's hand, proudly walking him to her teacher. "This is my dad," she said to everyone who asked. "He's the bravest person I know." Ethan smiled quietly. He didn't correct her. He never did. As the group arrived at the towering Navy ship, sailors in crisp uniforms stood ready to welcome them. But Ethan kept to the back, letting the others go first. He didn't want anyone to look too closely. But someone did. A Navy SEAL, tall and muscular, walked over with a teasing smirk as he saw Ethan's old boots, patched jacket, and quiet posture. "Hey sir," the SEAL said loudly enough for parents to hear. "Just curious, what's your rank? Fisherman first class?" A few parents chuckled. Ethan didn't. He simply replied, "I'm just a dad." The SEAL laughed harder. "Yeah, sure. You look like you never stepped foot on a ship in your life." Emily squeezed her father's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "why is he talking like that?" Ethan knelt beside her. "It's okay. Some people talk before they understand." The SEAL heard and chuckled again. "Whatever you say, man." But that was the last moment anyone laughed at Ethan Cole. Because as the tour began, one of the ship's senior officers turned a corner, saw Ethan standing there. And the color drained from his face. "Sir? Is that really you?" he stammered. Ethan froze. Emily looked up at him. "Daddy? Do you know him?" Before Ethan could answer, the officer bolted toward the control center, yelling into his radio. And within minutes, everything changed. The atmosphere on the ship shifted like the air before a storm. Sailors stood straighter. Commanders rushed across the deck, whispering urgently. The parents and children didn't understand what was happening, but they felt it. Something enormous was unfolding around them. Emily held her father's hand tighter. "Daddy, is something wrong?" Ethan took a deep breath. "No, sweetheart. But something I didn't want to deal with is happening." The young SEAL who had mocked him earlier watched the sudden commotion in confusion. "What's going on?" he muttered to another sailor. The sailor whispered back, eyes wide. They said the ghost is here." "The who?" "You idiot, the decorated operative who saved the Pacific Fleet 10 years ago. The man who took out an entire strike team by himself. The man who refused every medal. They say he disappeared." The SEAL blinked. "You're joking." "Look," the sailor whispered. "They say he had a daughter, and that's why he retired." The SEAL's smirk vanished. Meanwhile, the admirals had gathered. Every single one of them. Highly decorated, battle-hardened leaders of the Navy. Men and women who commanded thousands. They formed a line on the deck, their uniforms immaculate, their faces solemn. Parents gasped. Children stared. Even the teacher stepped back. And Ethan? He closed his eyes. "Not today," he whispered. But it was too late. Admiral Richter, the same man whose life Ethan had saved long ago, stepped forward. His voice trembled. "It's an honor to have you back on board, Master Chief Cole." The entire deck went silent. The SEAL's face drained of all color. Emily looked at her father, stunned. "Daddy, you were Master Chief?" Ethan kneeled and touched her cheek. "I was a lot of things, sweetheart. But the only title I ever wanted was your dad." Then every admiral lifted their hand and saluted him. The sound of dozens of synchronized salutes cracked through the air like lightning. Ethan didn't move. He didn't want this. He didn't want to be remembered for the things he had done in darkness. He didn't want to be honored for missions that cost him pieces of his soul. He just wanted to be a father. But the admirals held their salute. Finally, Ethan stood tall. Not for himself. Not for the admirals. Not for the legends. He stood because his daughter was watching, and he wanted her to know that even the quietest people can carry the loudest stories. He returned the salute. And the deck erupted in applause. Even the SEAL lowered his head. "Sir." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." Ethan placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "I know. Learn from it." As the tour resumed, Emily clung to her dad, more proud than ever. "Daddy, why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Ethan smiled, deeply and peacefully. "Because the world doesn't need to know who you are, Emily. Only how you treat people." Emily hugged him tightly. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt at peace with the past he could never fully escape.